Hello everyone and welcome to today's live stream where I'll be teaching you how to make the mini mimic effect. As you can see here, this is a live stream tutorial, so there will be mess ups, do-overs and stuff like that, and I hope you can bear with me when that comes around. But yeah, we'll get started. Open up your blenders if you're following along. Hopefully this won't be too complicated, but it might. We'll see what happens. Okay, so now that we have this, let's clear the scene and add in two planes. We'll have one plane for the floor right here, and one plane that will be our mimic, eventually. So let's start by adding in a new geometry nodes scene. Right here, we got a new scene, and we got our input and output right here. Alright, so to start out, what we are going to do is we are going to input our anchor point floor right here. We'll set this to relative, make sure it's like that. And then we'll add in an instance on points node. Or wait, before we do that, we do a distribute points on faces. See, little mess ups here and there, that's what I'm talking about. So that we can see, we now have points on this floor. Those points are where we're going to spawn our foot or the tendril foot object for the mimic. So what we're going to do next is instance on these points, but we'll need the foot object first, or the leg. So let's add in a new plane right here. Hopefully this isn't getting too complicated already. So let's move this over to here, and let's label this leg object, and let's just drag that into our collection right here. So we have anchor point floor, this is where our anchor points are going to be. Then we have our geometry nodes object right here, and then we have our leg object right here. So for the leg object, what we're going to do is just scale this down, and let's make this into just a point by merging it, just one vertex. Then what we're going to do is extrude down on this so that we have an edge line right here. If you guys get lost at any point, just say it in the chat and I'll back up and explain what happened when in greater detail. And then what we want to do is extrude this to the side a little bit. So now we have the leg basically going down into the side. And we could customize this later, and we can. Actually, right now, what I'm going to do is add in a subdivision surface modifier to kind of curve it a little bit. This is a mesh currently, but we will be converting it into a curve later, so keep that in mind. And now that we have this, let's go and rotate this and move it over a little bit. Let's just do 3 points right here for now. I'm going to make it so that we could see the subdivided view in edit mode. So right now, we just have these 3 points right here. And we can customize them a little bit more. Let's subdivide them and bring this down so it looks like there's more placement on the ground. So just 3 for now. We're just going to do 3 to keep it simple. We can edit this later on. Alright, so now that we have this, let's select our anchor point or our geometry nodes object, which has our points right here. Let's instance on points, instance on points node, drag the points into there. And as we could see, we have the leg right here. We can drag and drop the leg object into our geometry nodes tree, or we could select it manually. Either will work. And then we connect this into the instance right here. And then as we hook this up into here, we can see this is now instancing the legs in their proper place. Alright. So now that we have this, let's turn on grid snapping so that we can keep this all organized. Let's move this over to here. Move this over a bit. I'm going to turn off timings and named attribute overlays just so that it's cleaner for you guys to see. And I'll make a layout frame right here and label this. Let's see. Leg instancing. Let's see. Leg instancing. So that when you're looking through the tutorial later on, you could see easily what's happening when. What we want to do right now after this is let's add in a, let's connect the rotation to the rotation input right here. And what this means is if we were to edit the anchor point floor and have them rotated, the legs would be rotated on the side as well. Which I think we have too many legs right now, so let's change the density to like 0.2. Yeah, that's pretty good. But now what we want to do is make it so that these legs have a random rotation. So to do that, it's actually pretty simple. Let's use a utilities rotate Euler node. Let's see, there we go. Set it to local. And we could use axis angle for now on the z-axis because we'll be rotating just the z-axis. So let's move this over to here a little bit, move this up. And as we can see, as we rotate this, the legs are being rotated pretty regularly. But we want this to be random, not regular. So to do that, let's add in a random value node right here. Let's randomize the seed a little bit and connect this into the angle. Now, as we turn up the maximum rotation, all of these are rotated in different orientations, which will make it look like this is not just copied from one to the other. Alright, now that we have this, what we're going to do is we're going to convert our like mesh right here into a curve so that it will be easier to use later on. So curve, or mesh to curve. There we go, where is it? There we go, mesh to curve. Hook this into here, and hook this into the instance part. And then after its instance, we're going to realize these instances so they are actual geometry that we can use. Because right now they're like objects. They can't really be used easily. You could just rotate them and scale them. You can't deform them, which is what we're going to be doing next. So let's use a realize instances node. Put that right here and have this as the output. There we go. And I'll just keep this like that right there. So as we can see right here, we are instancing a converted from a mesh to curve object, and then realizing the instances while also rotating them. Does that make sense so far? If so, we can keep going. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Alright, so now that we have this, we can now do something very interesting. Here's the part where things get cool, basically. So let's use a set position node. And you guys probably know what the set position node does at this point. It changes the location of the geometry however we want, but we can manipulate this by, let's use the position input and connect this into here. And then we're going to use a mix RGB node. As we can see, let's change this to 0. When we slide this factor, it scales it down to 0 or to our origin point, which is what we want, because that's how we get the legs to to converge at one point. So to do that, what we're going to do is use the spline parameter. Let's see, parameter. That's why we changed these into a curve right here. We changed that into a curve so that we can access the spline parameter, which is basically a gradient saying, hey, up here, have it be 0 or black, and down here, we want it to be 1 or white. And if we hook this into the mix factor, as we can see, we're getting something interesting right now. So what it's doing is, I'll use a multiply node or a map, I think a color ramp would be the best option to demonstrate the effects. Let's see, color ramp. Let's see, I think the chat is frozen, so I may need to refresh this page. Tell me if anything goes wrong. Let's see, is the stream still going? Let's see. I think I'm still live, right? Right, okay. The chat is working, okay. People are enjoying the tutorial and don't have questions yet? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. The chat, when I was testing this, was pretty active, so now that people are silently doing their, following along in Blender, it's, just to make sure that everything's still going. Okay, so let's see. So since we have this color ramp, we can see that if we slide this around, we can decide which ones are in their normal position or in their, or at their 0 position, which is, the origin of the object. And we can edit this origin by using just a vector. So if we hook this into there, we can manipulate where this is, or just move the object origin. So I think I'll keep this like that for now. So we'll just do that. So as we can see, we have this, or let's use a map range node because that's a little more compacted. Let's see. I don't know, chat, what should it be? Color ramp or map range? I think a color ramp because people can understand that better than just values on a map range. So I think I'll do that. There we go. So now as we move this around, we can see the leg part is like grabbing the floor, even though we are moving the origin point. So let's do that. I'll make another frame and just combine this together. And I'll label this one, let's see, leg to origin, to object origin. There we go, that makes sense. I'll just put reroute there. I like these little units because you could just drag them around and do whatever you want, and then just rearrange them as you need. So let's move this over to here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to store an attribute. So get your attribute store named attribute node. This is only in Blender 3.2. I should have mentioned this earlier. You need Blender 3.2 for this tutorial. So if you don't have that, unfortunately, you might not be able to do the rest of this. Unfortunately. So what we're going to do now is use the distance from the origin point right here. And that's pretty simple. What we need to do is use position right here, and then have a vector math node, vector math right here, set to length or distance. Distance means that you can control like where the origin is, but length just does it automatically. So I think we'll just use length so that we have the least amount of possible errors. So let's hook that into there, and let's set the domain into spline. So that's the distance from the individual spline. All right, that should make sense. And let's label this distance right there. So now that we have this information stored, we could do the next big thing with this effect, which you will see in a little bit. We're going to add in the curve trim node. So attribute, or let's see, curve trim. Let's see, or trim curve node. And as we can see here, if I edit this, what happens is, boom, the curve gets trimmed just like that. And this is how we get it, the effect to make it look like the legs are growing out from the center and then landing and then moving and all that good stuff. So now that we have this, let's use the named attribute that we named distance right here. There we go. Let's just move this over a little bit. Now that we have this, we will use a map range node, map range, so that we can decide when will the effect happen. So let's hook that into there. As we can see, everything just disappeared. And that's because everything was just too far away. So let's set this to 10 and a minimum to like 2. And as we can see, as we move this around, the effect is working. And it's been 24 minutes, so not bad for getting the effect working that long into the tutorial. So as you should see in your file, you now have the effect working. And that's the basics of the entire effect. Just instance the curves on the surface that you want to move, capture the distance early on, set the origins to 0 or the ends of it to 0, and then trim the curve according to the length. And then what we're going to do next is mesh the curve. So let's do that. Let's add in another frame and, whoops, move that part around a little bit more. Let's do that, move it over. Let's see, leg to object origin, nope, trim curves. There we go. So does this make sense, folks? Leg instancing, capture attribute, let's see, store this distance, distance. And then leg to object origin, and then trim curves. And now for the last part, before we add in, optimizations and stuff like that, is the curve to mesh option right here. So right here we have this, and nothing's happening at the moment, but now we need a curve primitive, curve circle. Let's set the resolution to 3 so that it doesn't lag. And then we hook this into the profile curve. And as we can see, stuff went wrong. That's because we need to turn the radius down a little bit. And we'll do more things to edit it as well. But now we have a mesh where our curve is. But let's optimize that a little bit and make it look good. So there is a set radius node, set curve radius right here. And we could use the spline parameter like we used before and hook this into here. And now we have basically, you know, at the end of the curve, or technically this is the start because it starts at the floor and then at the end, at the origin point, that's technically the end of the curve. But here, since the value is 0, it's small. It's basically nothing. But then when it gets to the center, it gets to the, you know, the normal length. And we could keep it like this if need be. So let's just do that right there. I think that actually looks good, but we can edit it with like a color ramp or something like that. I think I might. Let's see, color ramp. Color ramps are very useful. They're something that I usually use in the shader editor, but they carry over into the geometry nodes editor as well. Let's see. It seems like everyone in the chat is doing pretty well with this. Alright, the stream will most likely be saved unless something goes horribly wrong, which I don't think it will at this point. It seems like we're pretty much done in terms of the basic effect, and then we'll add in like noise and stuff like that later. Alright, so let's just edit this so that's more like that. These are a little bit too thick, so we can reduce the radius just by moving that down or moving the radius for that part as well. That's basically the mimic effect. So congratulations if you made it this far. Let's see, let's label this set radius. That's pretty good. And then I'll put this over to here. And I'll do mesh curve. Mesh curve. There we go. And now what we're going to do next is use a set material node. And we'll set the material to a new material. Let's just have it be like just material. That makes sense. Easy to understand for newer folks. But yeah, now that we're here, what do we do next? Let's see. You should do this more often. Yeah, I do want to do live streams more often. They're easier to do than normal videos. And I could get live interaction with the chat. And that's good. Alrighty then. Let's see, that seems pretty good. Alright, now we could add in some noise, which I'm sure you guys will find quite good. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to capture the spline parameter so that we could use it later. So let's use a store named attribute node, and we'll do this after moving the ends to the origin point, but it's not absolutely necessary. So let's do that. Let's put this right in here, and we'll label this gradient X, because we may want to UV unwrap these nodes later on. I'm not sure. So gradient X, and let's do parameter, spline parameter, and we hook that into there. Now that we've captured this gradient, or any data that we capture in here, we can access in the shader editor later on. So I'll actually give you a preview of that right here. Let's input attribute and give it gradient X. I'll just copy this for now. As we can see, when this loads up, we can see that we are getting the spline parameter in the shader view. Here it's dark, and here it's light, which means that you can, in theory, add in like a noise texture set to 1D and do that. And now you could kind of texture the mimic. So that's cool. Are you interested in creating the mimic effect or the venom effect? This was kind of inspired by Venom and also the mimics from Edge of Tomorrow. So it's a combination of that. If I were to make the Venom effect, I would need to almost make a fluid simulation for kind of the black alien goo, like the sentient goo. And that would take a lot of computing power that my $500 PC cannot handle. So this is the fast version that it just works. So yeah, let's do that. And let's add in the noise. So geometry node editor, since we captured the gradient, let's now also capture the index of the spline. So let's do that. Let's set this to spline, and let's label this SID for spline ID. And we could change this to integer. And we want to input the index right here. So what this does is, and I'll show you in the shader editor, so we captured the index, and what the index is, let's label this SID. This might blow out the camera a little bit because there are values much higher than 0. Oh, I don't have bloom enabled. That's good. So what this does is it has a number for every single... Let's see, see, that part is not working, so maybe I mislabeled it. Let's go back into the geometry node editor. That should be working. Index captured to the spline. See, that should be working. Sorry, 1 second. We need to do a little bit bug fixing. Labeled it SID. Let's enable bloom to see if... Oh yeah, it's working. Just all the values were way too high to see, unfortunately. That means if I drag this up, it should... Still not sure it's working. Let's go back into the geometry node editor. Copy this to there. Alright, I need to try one more thing so that this hopefully works. Now let's set this to random value. Oops. Sorry if this is taking a little bit. This will hopefully be edited out of the last live stream. Okay, here we go. So now for every spline here, we have a random value for each one, which is good. And with this, we could give each one of these legs a random, shall we say, noise pattern. So let's do that. Let's go into the geometry nodes editor again. Right here, and I'll label this random. Right here, random per spline, basically. So there we go. And now let's go into the shader editor and have that in there as well so that we can see what's going on. So we have this geometry node editor. Okay, now that we have these 2 bits of data right here, let's see. Let's move this over. And now let's use a set position node. And let's have a noise texture, but we want the coordinates for this noise texture to be the spline parameter, or the gradient x, and random, so that each one will be randomized. So yeah, let's do that. Let's use a named attribute, so we're getting this data right here, gradient x, and also the random data right here. We're going to add these together. Let's see, vector math, or not vector math, just regular math for this one. Add. We're going to multiply the random just so that we can make it even more random if we want to in the future. And then we put this into our noise texture coordinate. And then we hook this up into the offset. As we can see, if we scale this, it is now randomizing the mimic, which it's a little bit offset. And we could fix that by using a vector math subtract node and setting it to 0.5. So that displaces in both the positive direction and negative direction. So that right here, plug that in right there. So as we can see, it's now moving in both directions, not just one. But we are running into a little problem. We don't have enough geometry, as we can see here. So we could just go back into our leg object right here. Remember, that exists. That's the cornerstone of this whole effect. And we could turn up the subdivisions. So let's just do 4, turn off use limit surface so that's faster. Is that enough? No, I think we need more. So let's set this to 5 subdivisions. And be careful, this can lag your computer if you put it up too high. So let's do that, scale these down. So yeah, as we can see, if we move these around, this now has random orientation for each one. And we can turn up the noise even more. So yeah, now it looks good. See, one thing I think I may want to do is scale these up a bit more. Let's change this into the median point, scale. I think that's good. And one thing we will want to do is disable this, the noise offset, depending on how close it is to the end point towards the floor. Sorry if I'm mixing my words a little bit. There we go. Let's put that there, put that there, put that there, put that there. And then we're going to use a scale node so that we can affect how much this affects the node tree. So for that, let's do that. So as we can see, we could change this into a big monstrosity, but we don't exactly want that. Let's set this to 1, and let's add in another frame. Let's put this right here. Alright, that's pretty good. And now what we're going to do, oh, and if you see GNS nodes, that's part of an add-on that is not part of normal Blender, and you do not need that for this tutorial. So if you see that, don't be confused, you don't need it. Alright, I should have disabled it before I started, but it's no big issue. Alright, so now that we have this, let's use the gradient X and use a color ramp again. Color ramp. And now we hook this into the scale right there. So now as it goes towards the end of the start point of the leg, the noise will become ineffective completely. And then let's use another scale afterwards so that we can change the main scale afterwards. So we can make this 0 or a lot. I kind of like it when it's more, but it's more chaotic. You may not want that, you might, who knows. That should be good. Alright, so now that we have this, we'll put that right there. I'll label these after the fact. Okay, and we're going to add in another add node so that we could kind of animate this so that the noise isn't just stagnant, as you can see here. So let's actually move this down so that the nodes are a bit more organized. Let's move this up. Hopefully this doesn't get too confusing. But this is the first live stream. Things are going to be a little bit confusing, and I'll iron that out over time. So let's use another named attribute, except have the distance that we captured earlier. Again, right over here, we captured the distance from the center position of the object and put it in the spline domain. And then we'll have distance right here, and we'll add this to our gradient for the noise texture. So now, as we can see, it's a little much at this point, but as you can see, the noise is moving as we move this, which is cool, and you may want that. So let's just add in a multiply node so that we can decide how much this affects the end result, just so that we get a little bit of warping as it goes along. So yeah, that looks kind of cool. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So yeah, there's that. I think that may be everything we need. Again, the distance part is optional. It's not 100% necessary, but it's kind of cool. And we could set this to negative in case we want it to go the opposite. Oh yeah, that looks better. That was what I was going for. So that looks like it's coming from the center rather than going out from the sides. There we go. Okay. So, let's see. Should I split these up? Yeah, I'll split this up. So I'll just put this into here as noise gradient. Let's see. Noise gradient. There we go. And then the output will be noise texture subtract. I'll just do that as noise. And then this part over here will be noise strength, just so that the labels are clear for you guys to see. So noise strength. There we go. Okay, so that's good. Does this make sense, folks? I think it should. I think I explained it pretty well. Here we are. That should be good. Alright. Hey there, huge fan of your work. Ah, thanks. That's encouraging. And I hope that this live stream will help you out on your journey, Blender journey. So yeah, now that we have this, I would say the effect is pretty much done. So I don't want to make this too complicated. It's already complicated enough, as you can see. That's the node tree. It's a bit big, so I think I'll call it there. But let's just do a little bit of shader node stuff. So we set the material right here. So let's go into the shader editor. And now let's see what data we can access. We have the random, so every single point on here we have. We can also access the distance. Make sure you spell it correctly. So let's see right here, we have the distance from the origin point, which basically says kind of like the time, or like the how long across the animation it is. So the parts further away will be white, and the parts closer will be black. So as we can see it's kind of snapping into place. So that's good. Random and all that. So let's use both the random and the gradient X, kind of like we did in the geometry nodes tab. And let's use that to offset the noise for each part a random amount. So let's combine that and that. And also you can press Control H to hide the unused sockets in your attribute nodes, which I find very useful. So here we can offset this so that now the noise is evenly or unevenly distributed. Okay, yeah, I'll do a recap at the end. And we can connect this to the output, so now, there we go. That actually looks kind of gross. So let's change the colors to a more abstract green. So yeah, now it looks more like vines instead. Or I could just have this gray and black. That could look good. Gray and black. There was that... Okay, that's looking better. There was a version of this that looked like worms, but I decided it was too gross to release, so I decided against it. But yeah, there we are. We could change the noise. I think it still looks a bit too stiff and inorganic, so we could just turn up the noise amount a bit more, so that it's more like that. Yeah, that's looking pretty good, I'd say. But yeah. Let's maybe 3. Yeah, I think that looks good. But yeah, that's basically the effect. And also, don't forget, we can copy and move around these leg points and move them around even more after the fact. So we can add in as many of these kind of tendrils as we want. So there we go. That's basically the mimic effect. If you made it this far, congratulations. And yeah, you've completed my first live stream tutorial. So let's do the recap, as one of our viewers suggested. So we start out, we have our leg object right here, which we instance on the main center point. So yeah, let's go back. So first, we distribute points on our anchor point floor right here. And then we instance the foot object, basically, according to the orientation, and we randomize the Z rotation right there. We make sure that it's converted into a curve because the original object is a mesh, as we can see there. Then after we do that, we capture the distance to be used later, which we can't see right now. But then we use the spline parameter to mix between the position the object is currently in and the origin point, which is 0, 0, 0, which makes it look like this. So these kind of look like vines starting out. And that's kind of cool. So that's that. And then we capture more data, the spline parameter, and a random value per spline. This one's on the spline domain, and this one is on the point domain. Don't get those mixed up. Then what we do is displace these using the noise, as we can see. As we can see, they're all moving very cool. And then we trim the curves according to the distance from the origin. And we could also, an optimization that I did a while back, was you delete the faraway curves first and then trim them, so that's faster. But for this, I don't think we need it, because it's, you know, not huge and all that. So, and then afterwards we set the curve radius for it to be meshed later. So yeah, there we go. Here's our end result. Looks very good, very organic looking. And yeah, this could go on basically any object that you put into the anchor point floor, but it will get more laggy the bigger the object is. So keep that in mind. So yeah, I'll change the viewport material so that this is more seeable in the viewport. And turn down the roughness. a bit. So there we go. Thank you guys for stopping by. I think this was a successful first live stream. Show me your results on Twitter or Instagram. If you've made this and you've put your own spin on it to make it look cooler, let me know. Show me on Twitter and all that. The base file for this is on Gumroad. It's $4 or $5, I forget which, but it has all the bells and whistles in it, a very nice UI and stuff. So if you want the full version, it's on Gumroad or Blender Market. I'm on both of those platforms. But thank you for stopping by. I think it's time that I end the stream. So thank you for coming by. I'll see you next time. I don't know when I'm going to stream next time, but if you have suggestions, leave it in the comments. And yeah, thank you for watching. Here's a good overview of the entire node tree for you to reference later. Alright, see you guys next time.